there's this one Hasidic rabbi, and I was together with him, and we all sat at a table like this. There was about 30 of us, and we're all sitting, and we're waiting, and waiting, and waiting for him to say something. And he made us wait for 10 minutes before he said anything. And it had such a profound effect, because when he said his first word, out of all that silence, that gesture itself was very profound. It's like teaching us the importance of like speech, you know, out of that silence, right. Like that revelation, God's speech out of some pre-linguistic space. Like silence is pre-linguistic. To speak out of that is very, very profound. And it had a major effect on me. I can't forget it. I mean, it's like scrolled in my memory, engraved in my memory, so to speak. The other side of that is Ali G or something, you know, where he's in a court and he stands in front of the court and he says, I want to have a moment of silence. And he turns it into 10 minutes and it's just driving them crazy.
I just think that that presentation of the silence and waiting for the Rebbe to speak is much more a torturous moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what's happening with Revelation, with the two parts of Revelation. I think God's original presence, to keep on using the word presence, coming down onto the mountain is torture, because all of a sudden everybody there, and if you accept the idea that everybody could feel it and sense it completely, the blind could see, the deaf could hear, we can never be godlike. It's a horrible moment to suddenly realize how insignificant you are next to God, which really, I think, is that moment in Revelation. That's what it's about. It generates awe of God, it generates fear of God, and it generates a sense of one's own insignificance in the grand scheme of things. Mm-hmm. And then the words are they're like a life preserver. All of a sudden it's like, yes, you can't be God, but here, and only God can do this. I'm going to tell you how you can be the human version of God. I'm going to show you how to be godlike. And then the image that we like to see God wearing tefillin, like man wears tefillin, well, it's like the other way around almost. We wear tefillin to try and manifest our own godlike sense. Well, not me personally, but men wear tefillin in order to be like God. It's exactly the opposite from Greek perspective of gods, in that God is made in man's image. God is giving us the opportunity to remake ourselves as close as we can get in His image. Right. So.
And yet he doesn't have a body, and it doesn't have real tefillin.
That's a brilliant thing. My sister said that we are made in the image of a God who has no image. The paradox of that.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I got to think about that for about 10 minutes here. It's almost as if the word, we're a lot safer with talking about these gestures that we have to perform, these commandments, rather than looking for God, how God does them, even though midrashically we do say He does them.
It's much more visceral, much more emotional to look to somebody or look to a gesture and be affected by it. So I like that, how you explain that moment of anxiety, because it takes it's a visceral sense, the difference between God and ourselves. You know, I say God in this. I'm already gesturing.
Right.
Here I am gesturing up there, down here, fear, difference. But it's out of that difference, I think, that we negotiate our relationship with God. I mean, it says, I think Rashi, the medieval commentator, says that we have like the moment of revelation being renewed every day. It's like it's an endless thing, but how? Is it that, like as you say, understanding that difference? Is it feeling like that, wanting to come close to God yet not being able to totally imitate Him? Is there a frustration? Is there love? Like, for instance, Solomon says, I'm lovesick for God. Is this part of lovesickness, is not having your object of desire? It's trying to emulate something or wanting something you can't have. So maybe that has something to do with it. And that,
I think you're right. I think it's not just about the relationship with God, it's about our relationship with ourselves. Mm-hmm. That, like, in a way, it's very... So you imagine there's a slave, and then he's pulled out of Egypt by God, which is pretty impressive. It's quite an ego boost. He's taken to the mountain. He says, God wants to give you revelations. Very it really is. It's such a huge ego boost for the Jewish people. And then all of a sudden, God appears, and they suddenly realize how unimportant they are. And then they're left with that. They're just stuck in that for a moment. And the gesture of it almost seems impossible to relate to God at that point.